Welcome to a webinar for prospective students for the environmental professional programs. This is a series of webinars for prospective students to learn about the two programs in environmental conservation and environmental observation and informatics. For these webinars, we'll start with a quick introduction to both programs in case you're new here or this is the first time you are finding us. For today, our topic will be the curriculum and learning goals of each of the program options that we have in these professional programs. So after the intro, my colleague Megan will take over and talk about the curriculum of the environmental conservation program. And then I'll follow up with more information about the curriculum for the environmental observation and informatics program. We'll be able to answer questions as they come in, and we'll answer them also at the end. Okay, so the environmental professional programs, these are Masters of Science options offered through the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And there's a few things that I want to highlight that are unique about these programs and why we're so excited to be offering them within the Nelson Institute. One of the major things that make these programs unique and awesome is that they are considered a professional Master of Science. This means that you complete 32 credits in 15 months. So it's an accelerated and a condensed timeline. And it's really for people wanting to advance or change their careers. And this doesn't mean that people who just came out of an undergrad program can't join, but we really have a focus on professional development and a focus on taking the next step for your career. Importantly, it does not focus on primary research training. So this is a little bit different than other Masters of Science programs you might have found. And if you're curious about what exactly is a professional Master of Science, we had a previous webinar on this topic where we dive into more details about what makes this professional model unique. So feel free to check that out. Another thing that makes these programs unique are the cohort-based education. So for us, that means that all students start the program together and work through the program curriculum as a unit. So all students start in the summer and then graduate the following summer after completing all their credits. We also have a small cohort size so for each program, it's anywhere between 15 to 30 students. And this really allows the best interaction and learning with your peers and also with your instructors. It's not too big where you don't get to know everyone and learn from them during the time of the program. And finally, this program offers interdisciplinary training. And that's a really big focus because we are in the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, which is an interdisciplinary institute at UW-Madison. So we provide like technical skills with application to real world issues. And those real world issues are complex, and tackling them involves, people from multiple sectors or disciplines to be able to tackle them effectively. So we look at issues and apply our knowledge in a variety of different ways and coming at it from different directions. And because of that, because we have this interdisciplinary focus, we're thinking not just from one lens. We have a lot of connections with people who work in these areas, not just social scientists, not just biologists, not just statisticians. So students in these programs get an opportunity to grow their network across many disciplines. And I keep saying these programs, it is one degree in environmental conservation, but you can actually choose which program option you would like to join. So there's two program options, one in environmental conservation or the EC program, one in environmental observation and informatics or the EOI program. The EC program is focused on training in navigating complex decision-making and engaging with people and managing programs to understand science and communicate effectively. So how do we make the best use of conservation knowledge and apply it so we can be effective? The EOI program is focused more on training in environmental conservation broadly, but also remote sensing, GIS, and informatics to use big data at the intersection of geospatial and environmental fields. So more on the how do we use the data to be effective. We're going to talk about the different focuses of the curriculum for the rest of this webinar. Briefly, the program timeline is also unique, and it's part of what makes these programs professional. So the programs start in the summer, all students start in June. And the summer and the fall semester, so from about June to December, are in person on campus at UW-Madison in some of the best seasons of the year, summer and fall. Classes in the spring semester, so starting in January, are accessible entirely online, or you're able to join them virtually. Any student can stay in Madison, and in fact, most students do choose to stay in Madison. And if you do so, there's an opportunity to come to campus, meet with your instructors, see your peers, but you don't have to be. And so you can be anywhere in the world that you need to be and still access your courses online. The final summer of the program, so from May, June, July, and August, the year after you start, is not focused on classes, but focused on the project experience. So this is where you're actually working with an organization in what we call the leadership project. We do talk more about this leadership project in the webinar on what is a professional master's program, because it really is one of the things that sets apart these programs from a research degree. So that final experience is an 8 to 12 week project, and it's really where you combine your passions and your strengths and your professional goals with an organizational need. So all students have a unique project to them, working with an organization on their most pressing needs or conservation issues. It's something that you don't have to come in knowing, you don't have to develop yourself. That's really something that you develop within the program. And here are some examples of the organizations that students have worked with. And because the focus of this webinar today is on the curriculum between the EC and the EOI programs, I wanted to just briefly introduce the different topic focus areas for each program. And specifically just to highlight that each program is unique in the different skills that you will gain, but there is deliberate and really thoughtful overlap between the programs. So both programs provide core environmental conservation training and professional development. So thinking about leadership, professional development, communication, ethics, those types of things to be a good professional in the field of conservation are, you'll get those in both programs. The EOI program is more focused on these data topics, and the EC program is more focused on these people or practical application of conservation knowledge. And we'll go into this more in just a minute. A lot of what I talked about, if you want to learn more, is online. If you go to our website, you can learn more about each program. You can also view the past webinars and the recordings and get information about how to apply. Our application deadline is December 1st, and the next cohort starts in June. So there's still a bit of time to get your application in and start planning for your next step. So that's the brief intro. I will stop here and hand it over to Megan, who will take over and introduce the curriculum and start with the EC programs. If you do have questions about anything I talked about or anything that I haven't talked about, please feel free to use the Q&A and we will address them. All right,
Thanks,
Megan.
Sarah. Would you like to share your screen or should I?
Yeah, I can go ahead and.
Okay.
I can do that.
I'll just briefly introduce myself as Sarah pulls this up. My name is Megan Kautzer, and I'm the program coordinator for the environmental conservation program option in the professional programs. So.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
So there are a few things that we wanted to introduce that overlap both between the EC and EOI experience. So particularly around academic support, there is this really highly supportive cohort model that Sarah introduced. That is across the board, both the EC and EY cohorts with one another, but also supporting each other. They're usually about 10 to 25 students in each cohort, so they are small classroom-sized groups. So I guess as I'm talking about the cohort teammates right in the middle, those cohort teammates are really supportive both in what you can contribute and share and help your teammates, also that you can learn from them within that model. Academically, it's really great to be able to go through the majority of your courses with others who you know are there if you need to reach out and work about homework or concepts, things like that. The environmental professional program staff, which is myself, Sarah, and Nathan, our director, we're very much available and hands-on when it comes to the program. We are really lucky to have the dedicated time that we do to working directly in support of students. Your program coordinator, Sarah, and myself are focused entirely on our individual programs. We're not managing multiple programs, and we're not managing hundreds of students in an individual program. So that has a lot of support as well. Additionally, your faculty advisor, which you get in your final 2 semesters of the program once you figure out more of the direction for your project, as well as your host supervisor, the actual professional and individual that you would work with on site with your project, is there in support of your success. And then lastly, of course, within the Nelson Institute, the grad community is really a great space to connect with other graduate students in an interdisciplinary institute. So that is something that is of support for you as well. Something between both programs as well is we have a really strong focus and emphasis on networking with visiting experts, whether that's in person or setting up virtual events to connect with various professionals and those that are practitioners in the field that are really experiencing what's relevant and current and the pressing challenges in conservation today, whether that is a large NGO like IUCN or Conservation International, government agencies like the Fish and Wildlife Service or NASA, another large NGO like the Nature Conservancy, but we've connected with local to global professionals and experts, and just really expands the context that we have as students and lifelong learners in conservation for really how to be most effective and the most pressing challenges that we face today. Field trips are a really enriching opportunity for students in both cohorts, that we might do hands-on, more ecologically based field trips or optional additional field trips for those that want more exposure to field techniques and things like that, or just exposure to places that have really complex social factors that present a case study for what might be ahead for us as conservation professionals. Everything in between as well. It's been a great opportunity for students to get out and see the application of their work, but also the context and the setting. Some things are part of classes and other field trips are optional add-ons that students take advantage of. So moving into the environmental conservation program curriculum, we'll get started. This is a quote from our student Daniela, who was in the EC cohort graduating in 2018. This program provided me with better insights into the complex nature of environmental problems and equipped me with the knowledge and expertise to address them. This is really what we want to do, is lay the groundwork for better understanding the realities and the complexities of conservation issues that we're facing, but then also what can we do about it? So when these programs were being developed, really they were a shift from previous conservation biology focused master's degrees, and those who developed the programs were hearing from people in the field, practitioners, we need to better work with people to solve problems. So how do we get there? So these programs have been tailored in both the skill sets and the knowledge that we share in the environment we create to really help you be more effective in what conservation practitioners are facing today in the field. So the skills for interdisciplinary leaders, these are really the grounding skills and pillars of the EC program. Students are exposed to ecological and social sciences. We think about applied practice, or how we take what we know and use it in practice. Get an exposure to policy and planning in conservation, as well as this idea of innovative leadership. How do we problem solve and use our creative approaches to making change happen? So this slide just shows you that we've thought about all of these different pillars really strategically, and making sure that the coursework that our students take is thoughtful in supporting and expanding your skill set for you to move out into the field, feeling prepared as a conservation leader. And now I'm going to go into more detail about each of these courses that you take through the program. So this is, I'll share in chronological order, and we'll start with the cohort and leadership seminars. These are 2 one-credit seminars in your first summer that you start in the program that are really focused on a few things, namely relationship building, communication basics, your environmental ethic. The purpose, overarching goal of these seminars is to lay a really strong groundwork for being a reflective and thoughtful practitioner. So how can I take what I'm learning in this program, what I'm learning in my career, and shape and shift how I am as a professional once I'm out in this work. So communication is a really focused area in that seminar. Particularly, we use this fabulous book that we think about, the Conservationist Guide, Conservation Professional's Guide to Working with People. As we said, we know working with people is the thing that could make or break your success in conservation work. So learning those actual people skills is critical to your success. Our students in the next session of the summer take 2 courses, Conservation of Biodiversity and Land Use Planning and Policy. So the Conservation of Biodiversity course is focused on ecology, current and relevant biodiversity conservation practices. And this is really laying the groundwork for the fundamentals of ecology and scientific research that you can then apply in your remaining classes. The Land Use Policy and Planning course focuses more on legal process, connecting science to policy, and the power of organizing. So really, this course is mapped out to understand the historical underpinnings for how we approach processes in government. Importantly, things like private property rights, and these constitutional underpinnings that are a part of legal processes. And we recognize there are obstacles to creating change when it comes to policy. So this class goes into how to organize people to generate power, why it's challenging to get through the legislative process, and how to navigate and work through that. So it wraps up with this focus on international comparative law. So bringing in expert speakers and understanding from a US perspective, as well as an international perspective, what role does policy play and what role do I play as an individual who's not a policymaker? So that course is really fantastic for getting students exposed to the realities of law and how that really mandates and kind of will be overarching to almost all the decision-making processes you'll do as a land use manager or conservationist. Students in the fall move into a really great course that students really take the learning from and apply in a lot of different ways in conservation planning. So in this course, the main takeaways are to analyze the situation, strategize the various approaches and steps you could take and interventions, and create a draft plan using what is known as the conservation standards. It's a formal framework that is really just the best practices, steps and process for making suggestions and making decisions about what to do. So this class is based on a real life project with a client. Students work to better understand the layout, their goals, their target strategies, and the things that they're looking to improve, whether it could be a local water project or an international project focused on an endangered species. Students are really thinking critically and analyzing what are the assumptions about the solutions we have, what are some activities and interventions we could place here, what things should be monitored to evaluate if it's effective or not, as well as thinking of even like the reality of budget constraints and mapping out a work plan. So it's a really practical course, really rigorous and challenging, but in working with a client, it becomes very tangible. So really great course that you can take that learning and apply to pretty much any of your conservation work moving forward. The second fall course that's in the EC program is this professional success seminar. Essentially, these are crucial and practical professional skills for a career in conservation. So things like team functionality, understanding culture and difference, science communication, students who have to learn how to work with the media or share their message, as well as things like personal self-awareness and career planning in the mix. We do incorporate thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice in conservation, as well as really trying to lean into writing and proposal writing for your project for your final semester. So this is sort of a crash course in learning those soft skills and people skills that can hold you back if we don't have that skill set as a professional. In the fall, you get to choose 2 electives of your choice to expand your knowledge and skills in a specialized area of your choosing. And I have a slide in a little bit to show some of the courses that are offered and some of the courses that our students tend to enroll in. Okay, moving into the spring coursework. One of your chunks of your spring semester is 3 credits in GIS, specifically GIS for conservation. So students are mapping an ArcGIS software, specifically conservation focused and ecology challenges, thinking about how can I apply GIS mapping to these conservation challenges. This is a course that is challenging and rigorous for a lot of students, and they really feel, even with minimal GIS background, are really pleased that they can have a foundation for what GIS is, how we can use it, and better take that moving forward. It's a really critical employability skill as well for standing out. So that one's just a really important class for students. We have a course in legislative engagement. So thinking about legislative procedures and agency-based conservation. So this is a further introduction to the basic functions of government, specifically the realities of public lands conservation. You will get exposed to the bureaucratic challenges that can come up when working with public lands, the interagency and transboundary issues when it comes to land use management. And specifically, you'll look at case studies, real life case studies about things that are happening in communities and conservation challenges when there's not a scientific answer. So it's a very interesting course that will get you just, again, to build a foundation, just a little bit that will help you move forward with the realities of working within an agency. Adaptive management is a 1-credit course that, like legislative engagement, that is an extension from your conservation planning course. So this is thinking about the final steps of that formal framework and conservation standards. So how do I use monitoring and evaluation to inform our adaptation? This is really, that's the 100% the best practice approach, and thinking of actual conservation projects. We can implement strategies and interventions. Do we know that it's working, and can we adapt from what we learn about that? So this adaptive management component is really great to round out your training in the conservation standards. one of your 1-credit tools courses is, or actually, this is a 3-credit course. So one of the main courses in the spring is environmental decision making and evaluation. So the first 2/3 of the class are thinking about environmental decision making, really this idea of navigating socio-political challenges that come up when making these decisions. So you read really actually quite fascinating stories, in-depth stories about real challenges and conservation problems and how they evolved and how people made decisions through them. And lastly, the last third of the class is focused on specifically evaluation. So evaluating effectiveness and impact, more so around how do I actually create an evaluation? What questions am I looking to ask? What format can I put this in? So developing that evaluative thinking is a big challenge, and actually lots of people are not explicitly trained in it. Yet at the same time, in conservation work, conservation funders and donors, where the funding source is coming from, want to see, is this having an impact? So those conservationists on the ground might be under a lot more pressure to show results or to show and evaluate. Here's what we implemented, here's what we're seeing based on the funds that you provided us. So that evaluation skill set is also another really critical employability piece, and something that you can take moving forward as a professional. And lastly, a 1-credit course in grant writing and conservation financing. So this is real practice, exposure to different funding programs in conservation, and exposure, particularly now we've added on this unique financing challenges in conservation today. So I will pause there. I believe that might be the end of my EC curriculum component, I think. Oh, I forgot, elective options. Thanks, Sarah. So as I mentioned earlier, students, you do get to select 2 courses or 6 credits in the fall semester. These offerings do change from year to year. These are courses across campus. So every year it might be a little different. But typically students are required to take 3 credits from the social systems and sustainability bucket side of things, and 3 credits from the biology and ecology side of things. Here are some courses in the social systems and sustainability side. Students in the EC program really love and tend to take the International Sustainable Development course, as well as the water governance, policy and conflict, and policy and politics of environmental information. We do also offer, as you can see here, several other courses in nonprofit organization, air pollution and human health, infrastructure and indigenous water. So some really cool course offerings there that do change year to year, but typically these would be some of the core courses. In the biology ecology side, these pretty much stay the same every year, which is great because students really want to take these courses, so that's fantastic. Bioacoustics and for conservation is a new addition this year and super cool. If you're not aware of bioacoustics for conservation of biodiversity, look it up. Really great work happening at the UW campus. Majority of our students enroll in these 3 bolded courses that I've highlighted here: climate change ecology, restoration ecology, and limnology. All really, really strongly developed courses and expose you to a number of different areas in the ecology space that you get to select and specialize in based on your interests. So I believe now I will share just a quick quote and then pause there. This is just a quote from one of our students, that the coursework increased my confidence with and knowledge of environmental science. The new perspectives and viewpoints gained through the cohort model and through close contact with UW staff and faculty contributed to my higher level of confidence. I truly feel like a professional, which is fabulous to hear. And here's just an image of our EC4 students out in the water back in 2017, I believe. So, okay, I'll pause there. Thanks, Sarah, and pass it on to the EOI curriculum. And as I just want to mention, if you do have questions, go ahead and drop it in the Q&A, and we'll be able to address them.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Megan. I'll just wait here for 10 seconds to see if there's any questions that come in about the EC curriculum before moving on to EOI. Okay. And if you've just joined us, welcome. The second half will be about the environmental observation and informatics curriculum, and we'll still have time at the end for questions about the curriculum for either program, or questions in general about these programs that we can address for you. So my name is Sarah Graves. I am the coordinator for the EOI program, like Megan, who is the program coordinator for the EC program. So I focus solely on the students in this degree option, and work closely with Megan just to support students in general. So the EOI program, what I think is really important and really cool about this program is that UW-Madison has this really strong legacy of environmental remote sensing. Some of the founding professors and researchers who literally wrote the book on environmental remote sensing, the textbook on it, were at UW-Madison before they retired. And with that focus in those faculty members and that research, there were a few graduate degrees in environmental remote sensing or environmental monitoring. So there was a big center for environmental remote sensing, and then there was a few graduate degree options in environmental monitoring, which is just a sort of another way to say remote sensing or observation informatics. So that's this really strong legacy that we have. But like EC, we went through this transformation of the program where we're deliberately making the curriculum applicable to what professionals are needing for their work in this field. So now we have this deliberate connection to conservation action. So how can we use data for conservation? So EOI is this modernization of the former environmental monitoring program that is meeting the demand in conservation for people who can effectively use spatial data. Spatial data is growing and it's everywhere. Because it's so fundamental to talking about the curriculum, I just wanted to pause and make sure I share what I mean when we say observation and informatics. What are those terms? Briefly, you can think about it as observation is collecting data about our Earth, observing things and getting that information. So this is really rooted in environmental remote sensing. Earth observation is another term that's used. So it's all of this collecting the information from satellites or drones and getting that data to use. And then the informatics side of things is using that data in an informed way. So how can you do appropriate analyses, make effective visualization, and then use that knowledge for decision-making or for conservation prioritizing? So this is where you bring in, some of the analysis and classification and image interpretation, using some of the software and technology, all to drive decisions or to gain a better understanding of an issue. So that's what we mean when we talk about observation and informatics, because it's so core to the curriculum and the learning goals. And like I said, this EOI curriculum is designed to meet the market needs. And it's really great to get this feedback from students that this training is useful for them. So a graduate of the EOI program in the first cohort said that I found most people who are really good at GIS don't necessarily know the skills or mechanism of remote sensing technology. Knowing how to use remote sensing to do analyses definitely made me more competitive. So we're definitely just going beyond GIS and knowing how to push certain buttons. It's really these advanced technologies that are in use to help drive conservation. And how we've structured the curriculum, like how Megan showed for the EC program, is we really think about these three different pillars, and you have classes that support learning in each of these three pillars. The first pillar is remote sensing and spatial data technologies. So think of this as, how do I know what data is out there and get access to that data? So it's the fundamentals of remote sensing and spatial data, basically how we get information about our world. So that's a big part of this curriculum, and just capturing or the skills to capture that data. From there, though, you have to do something with that data. So the second pillar is the modeling and the data analysis. So just because you have the data doesn't mean you know what to do with it. It's really that modeling and analysis training that helps you turn that data into information, useful information. But that still isn't enough, because then you need this third pillar, which is the innovative leadership. And this touches on stuff that's similar to the EC program, where you have to understand systems and rules and communication to make effective use of that information that you've generated from the data. So that's this third pillar, and classes fall into each of these three pillars. So each tile here is a class, and the color and the little symbol represents which pillar it falls under. Just highlighting here that that first top row are all of the core remote sensing classes. So you take 3 remote sensing classes, the summer, the fall, and the spring. So there's 3 semesters of classes, each have a remote sensing course. In the summer, you take environmental remote sensing, which is really the foundations of interpreting and analyzing images. So this is accessible to people who don't have a background in remote sensing, and you're taking it for the first time, and you're learning, wow, the sun shines in the earth, and then that reflects light, and then we measure that. That's sort of really fundamental, those fundamental aspects of how we can get information about the Earth's surface. In the fall, you take digital image processing, which is more advanced science and methods to analyze that digital image data. So we can download a bunch of information from satellites, and they're really pretty, but how do you actually analyze those images to extract useful information? That's the focus of this digital image processing class. And then in the spring, you take advanced remote sensing, which kind of has 2 pieces to it. One piece is really understanding the physics of why remote sensing works. Most people don't have the opportunity to get this level of information to really understand what these images contain and why that information is useful. So you talk about the physics of like light and surfaces and interactions in the atmosphere. And that's just an advanced skill that really sets people apart. The second part of that advanced remote sensing classes is practical skills and how many professionals work with remote sensing data now. Because data is getting so big, it's so massive, there's so much of it, it's really requiring different skill sets and tools to work with that data effectively. So new online cloud processing platforms are available, which require some programming or some scripting skills. So that class gets into how to work effectively with that data as you would be maybe expected to as a professional. So that's the remote sensing core pillar. Also, in the summer and the fall, you have a few seminars that get at this innovative leadership piece, or how you can make effective use of this information. So the 2 seminars, the first one happens in the summer. It's the environmental monitoring seminar. This one really focuses on guided cohort data management and a visualization project. So you're actually working with a client with spatial data and trying to meet their needs with the skills that you have. There's a second seminar in the summer and in the fall, which are more of these leadership seminars that give you more practical professional skills for a career in EOI. So this leadership seminar, there's actually 2 in there. There's one in the summer and then one in the fall. The one in the summer talks about ethics of using spatial data, applications for how remote sensing data is used for environmental conservation, and getting at some idea of what the field of environmental observation and informatics is professionally. So where do people go in the field with these skills? The second seminar, though, the second leadership seminar that you take in the fall is actually the same seminar that the environmental conservation students take with Megan. So this is where you're thinking about team functionality and culture, communication, diversity, and equity and Indigenous rights. So this is the what does Megan call it? The professional success seminar, how to be professional in conservation in ways that most people should know, but maybe aren't always taught. So that is a great seminar that students take with the EC students. Also in the fall is a conservation GIS class. This is really similar to the course that the EC students take. It's just tailored to the EOI students. This is, a solid GIS class where you're learning about spatial analysis, modeling, and communication for conservation topics. So it's looking about habitat suitability, wildlife movement, different sensitivity analyses for if you change the settings, how does that impact your output? And then a really big focus on cartography and communicating your analysis and your maps effectively to your audience. In the spring, you still get all three pillars. They're still integrated. Each of these courses listed here are 1 credit modules in the spring semester, with the exception of this elective of your choice. So these 5 courses are 1 credit modules that you take in the spring. One of those is remote sensing for conservation. That's the class that I teach, and it's exposure to the conservation and ecology issues for how to apply remote sensing. So we think about what is a disturbance in the environment? How do you measure a disturbance with remote sensing? Other topics are like ecosystem services. What does that mean? And how can we actually measure and model ecosystem services with this data? So that is a great application course. So you've learned all the technical stuff and now you're like, all right, how do I actually apply this to topics that I might encounter professionally? So these are actually, this is a summer course and this is a spring course, but each of these are sort of 1 credit modules. There's actually 3 here. The big data and statistics is 2 courses. These are that modeling and analysis. So it's statistics, it's fundamental. It's how do you appropriately work with data, especially spatial data. So for both of these classes, these statistics classes, you get hands-on experience analyzing big data sets in R. So you're doing all your statistical tests and modeling, and you're doing that in a programming environment with scripting in the R programming language. Spatial statistics is a continuation of fundamental statistics, but it's working with spatial data. And this is actually something a lot of people don't get as part of traditional graduate education. And it's something that we're finding is really in demand, especially for some organizations where they really are driven by science. The bottom 2 courses here in blue, part of this innovative leadership, are courses that are also taken with the EC students. So these are the same courses that Megan mentioned, these 1 credit modules, 1 on legislative engagement, so thinking about the latest issues and realities for conservation of public land, and 1 about grant writing, so the real practice of writing a grant and exposure to funding programs that are fundamental for working in the field of conservation. Excuse me. And like EC, there is an elective option. So that is also a thing for EOI students. So here are the elective options for students in the EOI course. They are the same elective options. What students choose might be slightly different though. And unlike the EC program where there's 2 elective options, the EOI students have 1 elective option in the fall. So there's still an opportunity to sort of focus and drill down on something that you're really interested in. So in the social systems and sustainability realm, many of the same courses that are offered to the EC students are offered to EOI. EOI students tend to take a course in remote sensing for international development or the policy and politics for environmental information. And these are offered pretty much every year and available for students to choose. If you decide that you need more of a background in biology and ecology, let's say you're not coming in with an environmental background, some of these other elective course options might be useful for you. So for example, bioacoustics and conservation, thinking about biodiversity and how we measure that with different sensors. Also a bunch of different ecology courses, forest ecology, climate change ecology, restoration ecology. These are popular and they really give students a strong foundation for that science and ecology. And this is especially relevant for people who aren't coming in with that background in environmental science or conservation topics. And I'll leave you here with one of the students, another graduate of the EOI program, who after graduating really recognized that the range of this program, the EOI program, allows what we have learned to be utilized in many disciplines, and now it's up to us to apply it. So the EOI program exposes you to a lot, and students take it in all different directions and are then equipped with the skills and the knowledge to apply what they learned for an environmental issue that they're passionate about. So I will leave it there. We should have time for questions. Yeah, we got about 10 minutes. So I'm going to stop sharing. Please feel free to use the chat to ask questions. I'm here, Megan is still here, and then our program director, Nathan Schulfer, who oversees and manages both programs and who's been around for quite a bit of time and knows them well, is also here to offer his input and wisdom. So thanks, Nathan, for joining us. All right.
One question.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead and take that, Megan?
Nathan, would you like to? I'm happy to, but if you want to share.
Sure. Well, thanks to both of you for those presentations. I enjoyed them as well. Good question about acceptance rates. It varies a little bit from year to year. And our acceptance rates, it's not quite the same as a traditional academic program because we're trying to understand what we describe as leadership potential, right? So we're looking a little bit deeper into applications. And what we have found is that a lot of people who apply to our programs really fit the bill, as you might say. They've really focused on how to use these applied skills. So our admission rates are generally a little bit higher than most programs. We don't get a massive, overwhelming amount of applications, but we oftentimes find that we get the right applications. We're really looking for people who are committed to finding a way to carve out a career, and hence more and more people are interested in these kinds of applied programs. So we have a generally pretty strong acceptance rate, but it does vary from year to year. So there's not a standard per se where we're at, or a metric that we're trying to achieve. That's a little vague, I know, and it might not help your question about trying to understand where you fit within that space, but I do know there's a webinar coming up on how to have a good application, and that webinar will be really helpful to make sure you're on the right side of that curve with a strong application. The application really is, of course, no surprise, the key to admissions, and a strong application is normally quite well received on our end. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that's great, Nathan. And the other thing that I sometimes mention is that Sarah and I, we have so many of these conversations that I would say 90% of the individuals who apply to the programs have had a one-on-one conversation with one or some of us, multiple of us. So you would know if what we offer is what you're looking for, and if this is a good fit for you and your goals. So those who it's not a good fit, don't apply.
Yeah.
Don't waste their time. So that's where having a smaller program is actually really helpful.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
the application process.
Yeah, we totally have those conversations with people. So if anyone here hasn't connected with us individually and wants to, we're here. We can leave our emails in the chat or use our website contact us form. And I think for EOI, what we have been able to admit most, if not all, people that meet the requirements. So really pay attention to those requirements at the grad school level, and thinking about your GIS and your quantitative background. We do want to make sure, because of the intensive, accelerated, and like technical nature of the EOI program, we just want to make sure that we're admitting people who will succeed. We don't want students to flounder or to struggle too much. So people who end up applying are those that have talked with me and like, yep, I can handle this program, and we've been able to admit them. But we will talk about this a little bit more at the next webinar coming up in 2 weeks on November 18th.
We had a question come in specifically for the EC program, and so I'll share that out. And it's a great question. I'm excited to talk about it. Okay, for the EC program specifically, how much emphasis in the curriculum is on communicating conservation practices with both tribal and agricultural communities? Brian, I would say the courses where we think about specifically communication techniques, bridging gaps, approaching conflict, navigating those challenging conversations, the books one of the book I referred to, and then you also have another book on people skills. I would say the formal instruction around that comes up in the leadership seminar, the cohort seminar, and the professional success seminar. So there's 3 credits in the summer and fall that are really thinking about communication best practices, as well as understanding ourselves and our own bias and our own approaches to working with different communities, whether that be agricultural communities, tribal communities, or any community member or stakeholders that you might work with. Messaging, our class yesterday was about messaging and framing, and trying to think about why does this matter to the specific audience I'm working with, and how can we better seek to share messaging and also connect with them. So I would say those are 3 specific areas where the curriculum is focused on that. I would also say that there are like 3/4 of our classes in the whole program are consistently thinking about application, if not more. We kind of bring it up in all our classes. So how does this apply to working with agricultural communities? How would this apply when I might engage with tribal communities? So that can come up, that idea of communication and connection with various communities, and the challenges that come up with that in any course that you might be in through the program. Nathan, I want you to add on maybe what you think about where this comes up as well. But that's kind of the core of the EC program, is this communication and connection with the various people that are influenced by and that make decisions about the environment. So Nathan, if you want to add more.
I would echo your comments, Megan. I think that those are the 3 core classes in EC, where you're always imagining, doing scenarios, thinking about how you communicate with those different kinds of communities. And I would also agree that it pops up in various ways in many of the different classes. When you think about framing issues, when you think about topics, who's the constituents, who supports, who opposes, whatever it might be, you're always thinking about how you communicate science to whomever the constituent base is. And then also probably in the fall courses, in those elective courses, you could choose a course where that might be an even greater focus to round that off. So woven between all of the courses in some way, shape, or form, because again, it's all about how do you take these ideas in the science and make it work on the ground? And just without a doubt, that requires engaging people in terms that they understand and care about. But that elective could be another really interesting way to strengthen ideas about communication to specific audiences as well.
And I guess I didn't even think about adding on too, is the final semester is the project component of the program. So of the 4 semesters, that whole last semester is unique and specific to the students' individual goals and professional gaps, the things you want to get experience with and go deeper on. So students often are prioritizing and thinking about the skills and what they want to be exposed to with Sarah and I as program coordinators, and with Nathan's support as well. From the very beginning in June through the fall semester, we're consistently thinking about, okay, I want to get more exposure to working with agriculture spaces, and thinking about connecting with tribal communities. Then that would be a priority for what you would work on through your project. So that's a huge chunk that would be of the curriculum still, the experience in the program that is dedicated toward getting that experience and exposure. We had two other questions come in. Did you see the, I don't know. So we had one, maybe Nathan, you could speak to, if accepted, do you allow for a 1-year deferment? And then we'll go to the next one in a moment.
We have oftentimes allowed deferments, in particular for, good reasons. I'm not sure quite how to define a good reason, but that could be a family consideration, a professional consideration. We are thoughtful about deferments, though, because we've got these sort of tailored cohorts in terms of the number of students in them. And when you get a big group of people deferring from year to year, it makes some of our admissions a little bit trickier. So if you were applied, you were admitted, and something came up and you needed a deferral, you would reach out to myself and Megan, or myself and Sarah, and we would just have a conversation with you. I mean, 99% of what we do revolves around these conversations with someone on Zoom or face-to-face, navigating whatever the issue is. So possible, yes, but we do put some thought into saying yes before we grant the deferral.
And then another question came in case of not being accepted into the program, can I apply the following year? And you provide reasons why one might not be accepted. It's a good question. Does anybody else want it?
I'll answer that one too.
Sure.
So in the unfortunate event that we have to send out a denial letter for admissions, I've always put in that letter to please feel free to reach out to me to have a conversation about why we made that decision. Honestly, very few people have ever taken me up on that offer, but it's always open and it's always available. And yes, we in all likelihood can point to some things that would make your application stronger for the following year. I think as Megan and Sarah were saying earlier, so many people interact with both of them before they apply that it turns out not to be so much of an issue that someone who's very strong has a mistake or something on their application. But certainly, if you are not admitted, we always open the space up to have a conversation about it, and we hope people follow up with us.
And we also do have a wait list. So just a consideration that if you are placed onto the wait list, that often we do backfill through the wait list. So if you were to apply and be placed on the wait list, I would consider that still a good possibility and chance that you would have the potential to join that cohort. And we do act on that really quickly once we hear back from students who've been admitted, if they choose not to come or not to go to grad school that year or whatever, we do act on that wait list really quickly.
Great. I'm not seeing any more questions, and we are at the hour. So we'll wrap it up here. Megan and I, let's put our maybe emails in the chat if you want to reach out to us directly. As you can get from the theme of what we're saying, we welcome conversations before you apply to make sure it feels good, to get some feedback on your, not feedback, but just to understand if you sort of meet the qualifications and if this program is a good fit for you. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're available on email. I can set up individual meetings. For more specifics about applications, if you haven't already looked at it yet, you should check out the application and our how to apply page on our website, and then come with your questions in 2 weeks for our next webinar, where we talk about application tips and reminders ahead of the December 1st deadline. If you want to go back and learn about what is a professional master's program, what jobs can I get with each of these programs, why does conservation even matter, or what are we doing in conservation these days, feel free to go watch the recordings of the webinars. It'll be us three talking in a similar way, and you can get some background information there. But thanks everyone for joining us today. We hope to see you at the next webinar on November 18th, and feel free to get in touch with us with any other questions.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Nathan. Bye-bye.